Just a red light.
Yeah, just a Are we ready, Chad? All right. Hang on.
You all right? 1 minute.
I'd like to call this April 2nd meeting of the Cookeville City Council to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilman Anderson.
Present.
Councilman Shelton.
Here.
Mayor Salee.
Present.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Present.
Councilman Williams.
Present.
All present.
All present. If we could all rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Shipley, do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda tonight?
We have one change. We need to move item 5 off of the consent agenda and move it to new business.
All right. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
We have our motion and our second. Any discussion? See none, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
All right. That brings us to our old business portion of the meeting. Item 2, consider approval of minutes of council meeting held on March the 19th, 2009. Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval.
We have our motion and our second. Please bear with us with our technical troubles tonight. We have our motion and our second. Any discussion by the council? Everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes? Seeing no discussion, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Now we come to our consent agenda. We have made some changes that aren't reflected in the slide. We have 2 items, item 3 and item 4. Item 3 is set a date for a public hearing on ordinance 090404, amendments to the zoning code section 208 to establish architectural design requirements. And item 4, setting a date for a public hearing on ordinance 090405, rezoning 156, 164, and 168 Stout Street and a portion of 349 Fouch Drive from RD Single Family and Duplex Residential to CL Local Commercial. Sponsor will be Kathy McLean, and those dates are, be May the 7th, 2009. Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
We have our motion or second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you. Brings us to our new business portion of the meeting. Item 5, consider awarding bids for the fire truck, hose, turnout gear, and air packs as a sole source. The fire department sponsor, Chief John Kendall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Would you like to address these together or separately, or what are your wishes?
Let's just go through them separately, I think would be good.
Okay. The first one in front of you is for a fire apparatus. This was a bid that we put based upon a demo or a new fire chassis. The bulk of this money is coming from federal grants, where we received a Assistance to Firefighter grant in this year to spend $250,000 on a fire apparatus. We felt that it was better if we bid a truck that was worth, or that met our needs a little bit more, that gave us a little bit more compartmentation, and spend just a little bit more in order to do that. We found an apparatus we felt met that need. It was a demo apparatus that had been used at dealer shows by a manufacturer. We put specifications together, and it came in at $284,707. We did have one bid that was below that. They did take several major exceptions to it. They have a demo that's also available, but it was less horsepower. It didn't have a foam system in it. It didn't have the same compartmentation. It didn't have shelving. They could add shelves to it. It didn't have aluminum wheels on it, and when we brought that back into the bid document, they were actually more than what this truck would be by the time they went back and added all that stuff back into it. And my recommendation would be that we purchase the truck from Southern Apparatus Sales, which is a Crimson product.
Okay. Do we want to, this we're taking these separately. Let's, do we have a motion and a second to approve the bid on the fire truck?
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion by the council.
With this demo truck, the warranties that would apply for a new truck, even though it's a demo, is that the case?
It has full warranties, as is brand new. That was one item that was in the bid document, that regardless, it's got 10,200, I think, 36 miles when it was bid, that it would come with full warranties, as if it was with 0 mileage. They assured us it would. It has the same warranties as a brand new apparatus.
Where's the $34,707 coming from?
The difference in the proceeds is coming from money that was left over in the 2007 bond fund, that where projects came in under. Part of that's also coming out the 2008, where we had $23,000 appropriated for a roof on Station 4, and that actually came in $11,000 and something. So it's coming from mainly from '07, but some of it's coming from '08.
Okay.
So when you say we have a $250,000 federal grant, do we have the full $250,000, or are we having to pay admin fees or something, or is this something?
The total grants for the total grant we're receiving from the federal government is $254,515,000. In that was $30,000 for equipment and $2,800 for driver's training. Our match on that's $28,200, I believe. So you take the $28,000 plus the $34,000, so the total amount the city's committing to is $63,000.
Okay.
But
So
the balance is out of monies that we saved in other areas, or from a previous bond issue.
Correct.
It's not new money.
No,
So
that is correct.
So then the 63,000 instead of 34,000. So where is that? Is that 30,000 coming out of those same extraneous bond
The
issue
entire $63,000
monies?
is coming from that.
Okay, so
The required 10% match that we're making, plus the difference to buy this truck.
we already had the 28,000 match budgeted, correct? We
No,
did
not for this grant, no. The other grant we received that was $200,000, we did have that budgeted.
You feel this will fulfill our needs for the foreseeable future for new?
It does, barring any major breakdowns or accidents or something like that. It should put us where we need to be until we get a station and build a station, and which, you know, several years down the road, hopefully.
Will there be a vehicle retired?
On the last council meeting, we did surplus the 1976 Mack. That was part of the conditions on this grant.
Okay.
So we're waiting to see what happened with this, but it's been declared surplus even though it's still in use today until this is finalized.
Any further comments by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing no comments, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
All right, next item.
The next item that we bid was fire hose, and this is part of that $9,995 that was appropriated in the grant for fire hose for the truck. We had 4 bids on it, with the MES being the lowest bid, meeting the specs, and I recommend them.
Do we have a motion and a second?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have our motion and second. Any discussion?
And so this is part of the money that
Correct.
we just talked about.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carried.
The next item is turnout gear. This was a budgeted item. It's not covered by the federal grant. 14 sets, with the lowest evaluated bidder meeting the specifications was MES. The 2 lower bids had major exceptions. One of them had 16 exceptions to the bid document. The other one had about 10. Mainly in the areas of the type material being used and the vapor barrier and moisture barrier that put our firefighters at higher risk for burns and steam injuries.
There appears to be a miscalculation on that, because that should be 20,
It
shouldn't
should
that be
be 25.
564?
The unit price is correct. He
Right.
just extended it out. Actually, we just finished a assessment of our gear, and we're only actually going to need 13 instead of 14, so it's still going to be a difference of $800 underneath that total.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
So we're approving 25,564.
Approving,
Minus 800, or,
Or
excuse
We're
me,
approving
sorry.
24.
1826 is per.
It's 1826 times,
We're approving 14 sets at their price of 24, even though that should be 25, but we're actually going to only purchase 13 sets, so we're actually approving it for more than it is.
So it's 13 times 1826.
Yes, ma'am.
what you got down there, Kathy? You got a calculator?
We need to,
Tipley's got it.
And I didn't catch the mathematical error till yesterday, so I apologize on that.
do we need to just say approve 13?
13 sets.
At 1826?
1826.
Make that the
Yeah.
motion.
Up with us.
Yeah.
Let's revise the motion, make it 13 sets at 1826.
Who made the
Whatever that
motion?
total is. We'll leave it up to
26.
the finance director to do some math.
Looking at
18.
23.
23,738.
Our attorney here got it right. Yay.
old school too, no calculator.
Yeah, he knows how to do that math.
That's his billable rate, I think.
Well, since we're, I mean, is there any reason to change what we said? Because we are,
No,
It
Kathy's
says-
saying no. We got the
yeah,
motion on the floor.
we've got the price 1826 there,
Yeah.
and that's what we're paying.
13 sets of turnout gear at 1826 apiece, total of 23,738
Yes.
Is the motion.
is the motion. We had a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any discussion from the audience? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carried.
The last item is air packs, which is back underneath the grant money. It's for 2 additional air packs, the spare cylinders, the face pieces, and the voice amps. And this is with the grant money that we are approved.
Okay. Do we have a motion and a second to it?
Move for approval.
Second.
Have our motion and our second. Any discussion? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carried.
Thank you.
Nice tie, by the way.
This demo will be approximately a 30-day delivery time, so we should have it here right around the 1st of May.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 6, hold a public hearing and consider on first reading ordinance 090302, amendments to zoning code 204.9, fences, walls, and hedges. Sponsor, Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, over the past several years, the codes and planning departments have received numerous complaints about the location, safety, and appearance of fences, walls, and hedges. Some of the concerns include traffic visibility and hazard issues from solid fences and walls being placed adjacent to streets.
Changing of the guard here.
I expected him to
Sorry,
tag
the
you.
first team just got here.
I don't know. Sorry, Lane.
pedestrian safety issues from the use of barbed wire and other fencing located adjacent to streets and sidewalks, and appearance issues from the unfinished sides of fences facing outward towards adjoining properties and public streets. The City of Cookeville's current regulations for fences, walls, and hedges are found in Section 204.9 of the zoning code and either do not address or inadequately address these problems. To address some of these concerns, requirements have been prepared for consideration. The components of the proposed provisions include requiring permits for new fences and walls, limiting fence and wall materials, regulating the height, location, and orientation of fences, walls, and hedges, and requiring maintenance of fences and walls. A fee of $25 and plans indicating location, material type, and height must be submitted to obtain a permit. Permits are not required for maintenance of existing fences or walls or for the replacement at the same location. No permit is required for garden fencing when such fencing is not located within any required setback area. Materials for fences and walls are limited to standard fence and wall materials. The use of razor wire, barbed wire, and electrical fences in residential and commercial zones is prohibited except if used to fence large livestock, provided such fencing is located no closer than 10 feet from any public street or sidewalk, or unless the building official has determined that such fencing is necessary for a non-residential use deemed to be hazardous or in need of additional security. Low-voltage electric fences are allowed for domestic pets and to protect gardens. This is an example of a material that would be prohibited under the code. Another material that would be prohibited under the code. This is an example of barbed wire fencing. This would meet the code. It's used for livestock and is a minimum of 10 feet back from a public street. Fences and walls may be placed up to the side and rear property lines. It's the property owner's responsibility to determine the location of property lines, not the City of Cookeville's. No fence or wall may be placed in any street right-of-way unless determined by the city manager that excessive right-of-way exists and the fence or wall would not create a traffic hazard. In no case can a fence or wall be located closer than 5 feet from the edge of any street or 2 feet from any sidewalk. No fence or wall can be placed in a manner that impedes the flow of natural drainage. A clear area must be provided around all fire hydrants and utility structures. In residential districts on parcels of less than 5 acres, chain link and wire fencing is prohibited between the front of the house and any street. This is an example of a fence within the right-of-way or a wall within the street right-of-way. This is an example of a fence that is around a fire hydrant. These are examples of chain link fencing in the front yard of residential structures. Also a wire fence in front of this structure. This is an example of a chain link fence that would be permitted. It's to the rear of the structure, so all this would be permitted under the code. At street intersections, a visual clearance area must be maintained. No fence, wall, or hedge in the clearance area can exceed 3 feet in height. This illustration depicts the clear area that would have to be maintained. Permitted heights of fences and walls are based upon location and opaqueness. No fence or wall located in the required street setback area can exceed 4 feet in height if more than 25% opaque. In non-industrial zones, fences less than 25% opaque can be located in the street setback area to a height of 6 feet, and in industrial zones to a height of 10 feet. Allowances are made for corner or double frontage lots for walls more than 25% opaque. They can be up to a height of 6 feet for such lots to the rear and side of the structure, provided the fencing is no closer than 10 feet to the street. In non-residential zones, fences or walls placed to the side or rear of the structure cannot exceed 8 feet in height, and in industrial zones it cannot exceed 10 feet. Greater heights may be permitted by the building official for certain uses, including schools, utilities, and ball fields. This is an illustration that depicts the requirements for fences within the setback area. Now again, this applies in the setback area from the front property line. So solid fences can be no higher than 4 feet. This is an example of a fence that would be permitted. It's less than 4 feet in the front yard. This is also permitted. This would also be permitted. It's higher than 4 feet, but it's more than, or it's less than 25% opaque. This would be a permitted fence. This is a fence that would be prohibited within the first 30 feet of the setback area. This first 30 feet of this exceeds the maximum 4-foot height and it's also more than 25% opaque. These are more examples that would exceed the height requirement. This is a fence in the front yard. This would not comply under the current code, or proposed code, excuse me. This is an example of how you can make a fence comply with the proposed regulation. This is an existing fence, and you can imagine the setback line just to the other side of the tree, and you drop down to meet the requirement. This is another example that would comply with the proposed requirements. This is an illustration that depicts the requirement for double frontage lots. Here's an example. These lots front on Chatsworth and have a solid wall that goes around them. This would comply with the code because these are considered double frontage and corner lots. As to appearance of fences, the proposed code would require that the good or finished side of fencing face outward. The code also would establish that fences and walls must be maintained. Here's an example of the unfinished side of a fence facing outward. This doesn't show up too good, but that is another example. And here's one other example of the outside or the unfinished side of a fence facing outward. Temporary fencing for construction projects, including fencing for soil erosion and sediment control, and any fencing required by federal, state, or local regulations are exempt. The proposed amendments have been approved by the Planning Commission and are recommended by the Planning Department. If you have any questions, I'll try to address them.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have our motion and our second, and discussion by the council.
Well, I'd like to ask about the reasoning about the various, why the height is so important when it has not anything to do with safety and vision, like on a corner or pulling out onto the street. If it's far back, why does it have to be a
Well, there's a couple reasons
Right.
for that. First, I guess, would be aesthetics or appearance is one of the concerns that the Planning Commission had. The other, even though you're in the middle of a block, if you go all the way to the street, you still have driveways, and you've got to pull in and out of the driveways. And you can block, and we have instances where visibility for an adjoining property owner is blocked because of a fence. There were some photos that show that. If a fence goes 6 feet out high, all the way out to the edge of the street, you're going to have difficulty seeing pulling in and out.
No, I understand, if you couldn't go all the way, but you're saying a 6-foot fence, I mean, so it's got to be 6 feet if it's open fence. It can't be any higher than 6 feet, even if it's 20 feet back from the street?
The requirements apply within the setback area. Once you get back past the setback area in residential, 8 feet is the maximum height. And then also the degree of visibility drops too when you're outside the setback area. The concern is within that front setback area, or the area between the structure and the street, the setbacks in those areas.
In the picture he showed on Fisk, I think it was, there was a picture on Fisk, that was the reason why. You've got to, if you're in a vehicle and that your neighbor were to put up that fence and you're parked on, it's Fisk, and you're parked there, you wouldn't be able to see to the left of you and access the roadway. So it'd be very difficult to do that because the fence is so high and you can't see out of it. That's the reason for having to step down in the height.
That is part of the reason. The other reason was, there is an example on Fisk that was used, and that was one of the more current complaints that we received, is if every property owner through that street put fences all the way out to the street, the Planning Commission and other citizens are concerned about the appearance, that you're just going to see a roll of wood fencing, you don't see lawns, you don't see. So a lot of this, or part of this, is appearance or aesthetics.
As we talked about in work session, I have a real problem with the orientation part about the all fences and walls shall be oriented with the good or finished side facing outward. I just think that's dictating undue cost onto somebody who chooses to do that. I gave an example of myself, and if I choose to put a fence up on my property, I don't think it's right to tell them that I have to spend double or 50% more to face both sides. You know, if you have if you were to have an instance of a neighbor who didn't want to participate in that with you, then, and I choose to orient the face inward, I don't agree with that part at all. And I asked you if there was anything you could do about that, as far as excluding that, or making some provision, or having a someone to look at that beyond, I guess, the Planning Commission. Do you?
No, and I've thought about how to do it. One option I thought about was maybe addressing it where it limiting to just the fences that face the street and not the adjoining property owner. For example, this one, if the part facing the street would have to be turned outward. But after thinking about it, this is one of the biggest concerns that we've had brought to us and that the Planning Commission members had, was the appearance of the fence. And to delete that, the council can do what they deem appropriate, but I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to take that out without going back to the Planning Commission about that. Now, and we talked about this Thursday, it's the same token for like this property owner. This guy's put the bad side out towards this adjoining property owner. Now, he's got to go, if he wants something more attractive, he's got to spend the money to put the good side up. So there's two sides to that argument, although I do understand yours.
Well, now, Mr. Mills, I'm just assuming that the Planning Commission did research this, and that what is the standard in other cities?
Well, of course, it varies, but we looked at many
Sure.
cities, and we've studied this probably, Councilman Williams, for 6 months.
Yeah.
This has been refined and worked on, and there's a lot of different, I mean, this is the final of many, many versions.
Sure.
But the standard is that the good side, I think you'll find that in most cities that have fence regulations. Not every city has fence regulations, that the outside or the finished side faces outward.
So is the intent of all this regulation for safety and visibility, or is it to have some utopian look that we're supposed to have?
I think it serves multiple purposes. Would be the answer to that. Appearance is a key component to it.
It certainly protects people's property from, I mean, it gives you some reasonable expectation that the people around you will have guidelines to go by in developing their property, which wouldn't adversely affect your value of your property. And it is certainly a compromise, as it would be in your situation with the good side of the fence. And I do think that and as it says here in the ordinance, that there are shadow box type fences, which typically, I mean, in a situation like this, and Councilman Williams can probably tell us better than I can, but could you not do a shadow box with the same material that you've got right there?
Yes, and
It wouldn't cost you any more material, would it?
no, it wouldn't. What would end up happening is you would alternate the slats so that one slat was on each side and you
Yeah.
rotate them down. It's not an additional cost. It's a different look, but it looks good on both sides.
You wouldn't have as much privacy.
If one were to stand at a 45-degree angle,
Correct.
2 to 3 feet from the fence, yes, you could see through the fence. But I think there wouldn't be an additional cost. But from a screening standpoint, if you stood 5 or more feet back from the fence and you looked at the fence, it would still meet the screening requirements. And to go back what Alma said earlier, this is something the Planning Commission spent. We've been talking about it probably off and on since I've been the representative of the Council of the Planning Commission. We've looked at many different things. We've had citizens come to us and say, my son and daughter are at risk because the finished side is on the property owner's side and there's nails sticking out, and I'm afraid that my child will fall and hit their head on these nails. And so obviously there is no utopia when it comes to fences, but there is what we feel like is the best minimal standard in order to try to create the community that we all desire to have. Of course, we think that this is a positive step there, and the Planning Commission has worked extremely hard in order to do that.
Well, and I definitely think that as we move forward with the city of Cookeville, it's so important to think about the aesthetics as we make changes to our commission and in architectural detail and all those things, just like, for instance, using the commercial neighborhood more frequently than at one time it was used, so that it is a very pleasing look. And I hesitate to say this, but that is very offsetting to me to see that fence with the outside out. I mean, the unfinished side out. I mean, and I don't want Cookeville to be a city that looks unwelcoming, and
to make abundantly clear too, is this is a standard for all new fencing. If you are a citizen, you currently have an existing fence, no one's telling you have to do anything with your fence. I think that's one thing to make a note of. But something happened to me this week, and I wanted to ask you a question on this. When someone comes to pull a permit on this, there's a $25 fee to pull permits that our planning department and building codes can look at the fencing type. When they do that, are they responsible to call Tennessee One Call or our utilities, or are we going to implement something there? One of the things that, for instance, my neighbor, she had a fence installed, and she cut her telephone line in two when they came to install it. Is that going to trigger anything at building codes or with Public Works in order to get someone to come out and mark these lines, or should we implement that as a part of this?
Well, what we'll do, if this is approved, there'll be a certificate of approval is issued, a permit's issued, and what we'll do is hand out a sheet that lists the requirements, and it'll include a clause on there, in bold letters, please contact Tennessee One Call. And Jeff can speak on this. When somebody gets a building permit, the onus is on the property owner to call to make sure that there's no utilities located, just like you were doing adding an addition to your house. But we would include on the paperwork when you get your apply for your fence permit, in bold letters, please contact Tennessee One Call before you dig.
And if you don't call and you hit something, you are liable for the damages that it causes.
Yeah, I think it's important. To say that. And obviously, with the permitting process in place, we're going to be able to remind people to do that. But the impetus is on the owner to make that call. It takes 36 hours, I think, and Jeff, or
about 3 days.
I don't know how long it is. 72 hours in order to do that. So it's not one of those things where you're going to pull a permit and start digging post the next day.
I would assume that your fence companies do that already, and that's something else we did. Send copies of these to all the fence companies and let them know about these.
What kind of comments did you get back from the fence companies, or did
we
you?
We haven't had any. We didn't have any at the planning commission, and we haven't had any yet as of yet.
You got one sitting here tonight, though.
Yeah. We'll give him an opportunity to speak if he'd like to.
We'll find out. That's.
Go ahead, Gene.
Well, I have one more question about, if you'll speak to a little bit more about not allowing fences in the front of the house that faces the street, no fencing in front of the house. And of course, there could be, I think you said in the work session, that if there could be a hardship case, an instant, maybe.
You're talking about the chain link fencing?
Yes, it would be in front of a house that faces
I mean,
the
this
street.
is a fence. This is a property that has fencing in the front, but this would meet code. If you're going to assume that the house is at its setback line, that area to the front would meet. And this is a double frontage lot. The area to the front can go up to 4 feet. The area to the rear can go up to 8 feet. And this is all new fencing too. Would meet the new code.
It would meet it.
Yes,
Okay.
this all complies with the new code. The difference here, what wouldn't be allowed, if you can assume, is this same 8-foot fence going all the way around the house, to the front of the house.
Which is what you showed a photo of that on.
Yeah, we've got a couple of those that, now this is one that would comply where they drop it down to the setback area. This is one with an 8-footer, approximately 8 foot in front of the house.
Back to the brick in Old Kentucky Road, Chatsworth.
Let's see if I can find it. Was it just before these?
Forward, it's forward.
Forward?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so that house which faces Chatsworth, if it were to face Old Kentucky Road, that fence would not be allowed under this.
Yeah, they would have to drop down to no higher than 4 feet to the front of the house.
They could still have a solid fence. It could
Yeah.
only be 4 feet in height.
And what is
Could you have 4 feet and then say wrought iron or
Yes,
something
you
across
could.
the top of it, or?
As long as that proportion is not more than 25 percent opaque.
Why is that? I mean, explain why that would be. If someone chose to do that, why could they not have that?
To do this all the way around your house?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think
Bill
most-
Gates moves here and wants to build a compound.
We're gonna tell him
He's
yes,
probably not
sir.
gonna build, he's probably not gonna
Oh,
build a
If Bill
compound
Gates
on an
came here,
RS10
here's,
lot.
this applies in your setback area. If you're Bill Gates and you've bought a big estate, you pull the fence back past your setback area, then you can go to 8
Build it
feet.
as high
It's
as you
just,
want.
it's that 35 or 30 or 25, whatever zoning district you're in.
Off the
It's
road.
that setback area, off the front property line, off the right of way. It's not, now, the
Alright.
minimum you can be from
Okay.
a road depends,
Gotcha.
you know, like this example, in the rear is 10 feet, in the front it's 5 feet. But, again, that's in your, if you're past that setback area, you know, if Bill Gates or whoever, if they want to do the compound, you go back to 35 feet. So you still have a green yard landscape area along, and again, this is mostly, if you look at it in terms of a block, where you've got several houses in a row, then you maintain this yard or this vista through that block.
And once again, I just want to reiterate, anybody who has an existing fence right now, that fence will stay until it needs to be replaced, correct?
And it can be replaced. And the replacement of fencing is also, no permits required for this. One thing that is required on replacement, and I'll go back to the last, and this was something that the planning commission, this was added in the last version and felt it was important. In this situation, if this fence came down, it could be replaced, but the good side would have to be facing, or the finished side would have to be faced outward.
I would propose an amendment to remove 204.9E from this, if anyone would like to second that. And that is about requiring the facing out and in, all that, so.
All right, we have a motion to amend. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Seeing no second, motion to amend fails due to lack of second. Back to the original motion. I'd just like to say, I think this is I just applaud the Planning Commission, having sat on there for 4 years and talked with Mr. Mills several times about architectural standards for our community. I think this is a step in the right direction, and certainly kind of a baseline to begin. I don't think that there's probably, as we've amended codes and ordinances in the past here, I think that this is definitely a good starting point. It may or may not be perfect, but I think it's a great place to start. And as time goes on, and as fence companies or landowners come to us with issues and bring it up, I'm sure the Planning Commission would be more than happy to look over those, and we can make amendments to this. But I do think as our city grows and the price of property and construction continues to go up, people's investment, this is just a way to help protect that for people, and I think this is a good move for us. And I appreciate the Planning Commission doing this.
We haven't heard from the audience. I thought I'd say that in case.
Do we have any more comments from the council? If not, I'll open up the floor at this time for the audience. Yes, sir. If you could come and identify yourself.
I'm J.D. Parks, and just a question whether this has any impact on vegetated fences or barriers. Is that included within the...
Hedges, landscaping, only for the visual clearance area. In that area, and that's one of the things that we've had a number of complaints, is where people have let hedges and bushes in that 25-foot area triangle grow up where you can't see. That would apply there. But no, if you wanted to plant Leland cypress or other trees like that, that's permitted.
As long as you're beyond the setback.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments by the audience?
I did have one other question I forgot to ask. Are we going to notify building material suppliers if, once we have a first and second reading, are we going to communicate with them to let them know that this is...
We've talked about that, and Jeff and I had that conversation this morning about, notifying Lowe's. Now, we have mailed out to the fences, well, we got out of the phone book 8 local fence companies. That's all we could find that were local or in this immediate vicinity. Well, we thought about mailing them out to, and I don't want to name companies, but most of them sell to larger areas than just Cookeville. I don't know what they're gonna do in terms of telling people, but we will surely provide them with the requirements. But I don't know what obligation they've got to tell a customer that,
Right.
that there are regulations.
Just, I want to clarify something that Mr. Parks asked, and this ordinance says fences, walls, and hedges, but when the word hedge is not used, is it implied that it pertains to everything that we're talking about here?
No,
Or only
the way
when
this
it-
was
or
written,
only when
the
it's
only time it applies to
specifically-
hedges is when it's specifically mentioned, and we do specifically mention that on the visibility. And that's the way this, the intent, the way this was written.
Any further comments by the council? Seeing none, all vote.
4 yes, 1 no, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Item 7, hold a public hearing and consider on first reading ordinance 090303, rezoning 6.7 acres on the Gainsboro grade, tax map 39, parcel 58.04, from CL Local Commercial and RS10 Single Family Residential to RS5 Single Family Residential, sponsor Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, this proposed rezoning was initiated at the request of Mr. Ed Butler on behalf of H&E Enterprises. The subject property consists of approximately 6.7 acres. Here's the general location of the property. Here's an aerial view of the properties, or the property, and the current zoning map. It's contiguous with RM8 multifamily residential zoning to the east, with RS10 zoning to the south, and with CL and RS10 zoning to the west. A large multifamily residential development is located adjacent to the east. Melrose subdivision is adjacent to the south, and the area to the west is currently undeveloped. The area to the north is unincorporated and is not zoned. Go back to the zoning map. The current zoning of the subject property is split, with the northern portion fronting West 12th Street consisting of approximately 3.8 acres zoned as CL, and the southern portion consisting of approximately 2.9 acres zoned as RS10. The RS5 zone is intended for moderate density single-family residential development. The minimum lot size in this zone is 5,000 square feet per dwelling unit. The petitioner has indicated that the purpose of the rezoning request is for the development of a single-family residential subdivision. A draft of the proposed subdivision plat indicates that approximately 40 lots could be developed on the property if rezoned. Assuming residential development of the property under current zoning, approximately 55 multifamily units could be located on the portion of the property zoned as CL, and approximately 10 single-family units could be located on the portion zoned as RS10. The proposed rezoning would indicate a potential 40% reduction in total residential density. The comprehensive future land use plan indicates that the subject property would be primarily best suited for low-density residential development, with a smaller portion along West 12th Street being best suited for mixed-density development. The proposed rezoning would appear to be more in agreement with the land use plan than the current zoning. Adequate infrastructure, including water and sewer, are indicated as being available to the property. The proposed rezoning has been approved by the Planning Commission and is recommended by the Planning Department.
Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
We have our motion and our second. Discussion by the council. My only question, it looks like we are dividing some RS10. There'll be RS10 to the west and to the south of this property. Is that the city limits to the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all that in white city limits
So we're,
And why?
It's outside the city limits.
is outside the city limit. Well, that's, yeah, that's the boundary.
so there'll be RS10 that'll be insulated. I mean, it'll be RS10 and then,
But that's several acres. That's probably 15 or so acres, maybe a little more than that. And this would be an RS5 area of 6.7 acres that would be
And you
insulated from other RS5.
Said how many residential lots? About 40?
40 is about all you could fit on there at
Okay.
5,000 square feet. And when you include streets, that many lots, you have to have two ways in and out. So the proposal would have a looped road, and that's about all you could do to get that many lots on that property. So right now, 55 apartments could be built on the part of CL, so this is actually potentially a reduction in the density.
That's a good thing.
Well, it's a good thing too, because it's entry-level homes, and
Yeah.
single-family residential.
Did we establish the CL zone back when all the...
Yes,
Yes.
when this was annexed.
Then, in your presentation, did you say that it would be more suited to residential?
In terms of the land use plan, yes.
Why did we zone it CL then?
Well, it's a mixed-use zone that's shown on the comprehensive plan. The front part of this is shown appropriate for this, but mixed use, you can go residential or commercial. The back side of this was single family, so either zone's appropriate, but in terms of looking at this as one piece of property, you know, the RS5 would comply with the plan, and probably fits better with the plan.
Okay.
One could go in, though, in the CL property because it's greater than that CL in residential, and do a PRD, though, on that portion.
Well, they'd have to be rezoned to do
Yeah,
the
but this
PRD.
this one couldn't be a PRD because it's not more than 7 acres, right?
It's 5 acres is the
Oh, is it
minimum
5?
for a
Is that two
PRD.
separate property?
No, that's one piece. The zone line splits it. Actually, this tract, all this to the west of RMA, all this was one piece when we annexed it. And I don't know, Mr. Butler could probably speak on this. A few months ago, it was divided up into 3 or 4 6-acre or approximately 6-acre tracts. That didn't come through us because it's wasn't required to by state law, but this is 6.7 acres that was cut off from the rest of it. So this is separate from the rest of that property.
So from a planning standpoint, I mean, we're cutting a portion of that. There's other parcels there now.
Mhm.
Is it not better to, considering that we're planning and I take that as, you know, we're being forward thinking, that we wouldn't just rezone that whole area?
Well, we thought about that too, and that's the point that, I'll go back to what Councilman Shelton, it was when we annexed this, and it was just a few years ago, between probably 2002, I think, or 1, we put the CL in at that time. We're in the process of redoing our plan now. I think we would rather have our plan adopted and have a more specific idea of how we'd like to see this area go under the proposed plan. I guess we didn't think it was totally fair to go in and rezone this to such a quick time after we've annexed and agreed to a zoning at that point in time. Not that the RS5 would not be appropriate for the rest of this. It probably would be appropriate for the rest of this property. And we may get, if there is a subdivision developed there, we probably could anticipate that type of request in the future.
Well, it just seems that, particularly if we go to RS5 on this, if you were buying a house in that zone, you would want some expectation to know, is it going to be CL next to my house, or is it going to be PRD? Is it going to be RS5? I mean, because it's sort of a hodgepodge of zones right there.
Well, to give you a little more history on this area was left as single family when we went through all this, when it was annexed, to provide a buffer to this residential area to the south.
Yeah.
And this would maintain that buffer, and in fact would improve that buffer. But there was a compromise reached to allow some commercial use of this. And to even go back to this aerial, to Mount Vernon, this area was left out when this was all developed. This area must be maintained as a buffer area, which is greater than is required by the zoning code. And that's part of why this, was left as a single-family zone.
I was trying to recall back, didn't the property owner request the CL on the front?
Yes.
Okay. But that property owner is not the same property owner now?
I don't know, not to this piece. I don't know about the
But
rest.
to any of it, that's what I was talking about.
Are you suggesting we have the planning commission look at that zoning? Is that what you're saying, or are you saying it's too early to do that?
Well, I think it'd be appropriate to be RS5.
Since we're
I was trying
redoing-
to explain why we didn't pursue that at this time was, again, because it was so early from or so quick after the annexation and zoning, and that we were in the process of redoing our plan now, that we felt like it might be better to wait, and we hadn't received a request for it. And we did notify the other property owners, but I'm not saying that that wouldn't be appropriate as RS5. I think it would be
Right.
appropriate.
No, I
This
think
might
RS5
stimulate
is
some
fine.
change.
I just, as I remember it, there was quite a bit of heartburn from some of those people in that area when we went to CL, and it was, this is there was a reason why that it, to justify why that it was okay to zone that CL, that they had a use for it. that was
Yeah,
gonna be.
that was, you're right, I'd
And so there
forgotten
was
that.
like
There
this kind
was
of, you know, they wanted it, the
use
people in that
for-
area wanted that to stay residential, which I think the RS5 is fine. I'm just saying maybe we should just do the whole thing RS5, is what,
And I think that's what I'm communicating to James as a planning commission representative. Maybe we should look at the rest of the
Do
zoning
this
in
and
the
then-
comprehensive land use plan.
We can
See
do
if we
that.
look at a
That's-
revision to it.
right.
But we can go ahead and do this one
Correct.
tonight.
Right.
And and then that would be, that might precipitate what else we do with the rest. And doesn't delay Mr. Butler.
Sure. Any further discussion by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Thank you.
Item 8, consider approval of the sale of alleyway at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, sponsor James Mills.
Mayor and council members, last October, the council approved the closure of a portion of an alley adjacent to St. Michael's Church. Here's the location, and the sale of the right-of-way to the church. The price for the 2,745 square feet of property was to be based upon the per square foot tax appraised value of adjacent properties, which was determined to be $3 per square foot, which was gave you a total of $7,425.
Square feet. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Mills. Go ahead.
Please proceed.
The church has requested that this amount be reduced by 25% due to the city's retention of a utility easement for the entire length and width of the alley. This reduction would place the value of the property at $5,569. The planning department and I believe the city manager would recommend your approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
And
Any-
once again, I'm going to excuse myself from this vote because of my long-time association with St. Michael's Church.
Well noted, thank you. Any further discussion by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
4 yes, 1 abstain, motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Mills. Item 9, consider approval of lease agreement with the Blood Assurance, sponsor Mr. Jim Shipley.
Mayor and council, this is, we've had a request from Blood Assurance to lease some parking space in our gas department parking lot so they have somewhere to park their donor bus. They have agreed to pay us $1 a day. We didn't have any idea what to charge. It's $365 a year. It's a lease for 5 years with the option to renew the lease for an additional 5 years. The lease requires Blood Assurance to be responsible for providing and installing the required electrical service for their bus to the satisfaction of the city, and that they will also be responsible for the monthly electric charges for that service. It requires them to have provide proof of liability and property damage insurance to the city and name the city as an additional insured, and they will have to they will be responsible for paying for any required pavement markings and or signage that's required. Blood Assurance is a nonprofit organization, and they are affiliated with Cookeville Regional Medical Center under contract. That portion of the parking lot in the gas department at the gas department is very seldom used, and I think this is a good service for Blood Assurance, and I would recommend your approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
Second. Any discussion by the council?
I'll be abstaining from this vote because I have an interest in this.
On the lease, I think you should put a limit on that insurance, so we just don't end up with a minimum limits policy. I think most commercial leases require at least $100,000. Maybe I would say $500,000 or $1 million liability insurance policy with driving a bus and everything.
Well, if the council will just give me authority to execute the lease, then we can make whatever minor changes to
Right.
insurance. I mean, they're just going to be parking their bus there, so.
And what about, I mean, what's our exit strategy out of this? If we decided if something happened, we sold the gas department or building over there, do we have like a way to get out of it? I don't see any.
Well, right now there is no termination provision in the lease. anticipate us selling the gas department.
Well, you know, I mean,
Been
well,
wanting
neither,
to
but
for years, but.
Nobody ever thought the Capshaw water tank could come down either until Ronnie Kelly got a hold of it.
He said Ronnie Kelly.
Well, let us see if we can't insert some sort of provision for termination.
Yeah, I think I'd feel better about it if we could do that.
I think the council can approve it and let the city manager negotiate those changes without any problem at all.
You know, and from blood assurance standpoint, they want to feel comfortable that they've got somewhere to, you know, that they're not going to be thrown out on the street too. So
Well,
they've got to kind of
you
move.
could easily do it as if blood assurance ceased.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
cease to operate there, it's
sold
not
or
transferable
Some other
and-
company acquired them, or, you know, who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, they need a way out too.
Any further comments by the council? You have to sign this in blood?
I always do.
Yeah, I
Seeing
think
seeing no further comments, all vote.
4 yes, 1 abstain, motion carried.
Item 10, consider approval of Hudgens Creek Sewer Line Property Easement Acquisition, sponsor Mr. Ronnie Kelly.
Mayor and council, we are finishing up property acquisition on the Hudgens Creek Interceptor Sewer Project, and we have, at this point in time, obtained 11 easements, signed easements. 2 are still under negotiation. We think we've got one of those resolved. 1 we're still negotiating with, and 1 we're preparing for condemnation. We're asking tonight for council authorization to authorize the city manager to proceed with condemnation proceedings on any of this property that we cannot obtain, purchase or obtain through negotiation with the property owner.
Do we have a motion and a second?
So
Move
moved.
approval.
We have a motion and our second. Discussion by the council.
Says that 1, there was condemnation being prepared for, and there are still 2 in negotiation, so we're allowing him to have the right, condemnation rights on 3 or 2.
3.
Well, I think that several months ago, I don't remember when it was, but the council did approve, give us authority to acquire property. It just wasn't really clear in the minutes as to whether or not we could use eminent domain. So what we need to do is make sure that when you give us that authority, it is to acquire property by whatever means. You know, if we have to kill them or whatever.
Please strike that.
Jim Shipley.
Insurance has got you all.
Yeah.
rabid here.
Either by eminent domain or negotiation.
Whatever legal means possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And please help our city manager.
You need me to come down there and sit by him.
Yeah, please.
No, I think so.
You need me to come sit by
Wow. All right.
Hey, where do you go from there?
Could we have a rereading of the motion there? I'm not sure. Okay, I think we understand that it's basically allowing city manager to work towards getting their sewer line expansion there, an acquisition of land through all legal means necessary. Any further comments by the council? Comments by the audience? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Item 11, consider utility agreement with the Cookeville Boat Dock Utility District, sponsor Mr. Ronnie Kelly.
Mayor and council, we've been in negotiations with the Cookeville Boat Dock Utility District concerning the property around the new industrial park. There has been a contract submitted for our review. Are in the process of reviewing it. I have highlighted the changes. If you would like for me to go over each of those changes, I can do that. I was in conversation with the city attorney a couple of days ago. I think there's some language that needs some clarification before we would recommend acting on this. And so it'd be my recommendation that you postpone this for some minor language changes until the next meeting.
Do we have a motion to accept Mr. Kelly's recommendation for a motion to
I do want to say Sean Fry called me today, and I've looked over the agreement, and I think we talked about this at the work session, and I think in principle 99% of everything is in order. There is some clarification with some time limits. The agreement they proposed didn't have any time limits on any of the actions, and I think we do need to tighten that language up a little bit and a few of the definitions, but I think we can meet with him and get that done, and hopefully present it at the next council meeting for final approval.
Okay. Do we have a motion to postpone, or a motion? I'll entertain.
Do we need a motion? I mean, he's just talking. I mean,
I guess that we have to have a motion.
I mean,
Well, I mean,
If
eventually,
we want to discuss it or anything,
Yeah.
we can.
you need a motion to postpone it,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and you need to set a definite date when you're going to bring it back.
all right,
So I would recommend you postpone it for 2 weeks.
so moved.
All right, we have a motion to postpone for 2 weeks. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on that motion to postpone? I'd just like to make just a brief comment that we did have a meeting with the Utility District Board, and County Executive Kim Blaylock attended that and helped facilitate that, as well as Jim Shibley. And I just really appreciated those folks coming up here and working with us on this, and hope to see this resolved in a fair way as quickly as possible. Any further comments? Comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
Thank you.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
I mean, five yes votes,
Yeah.
motion carries.
5 yes, all right.
Yeah, there we go.
At this time, we've got, item 12, receive the city's financials for 7/108 through 2/28/09. Sponsor, Mr. Mike Davidson.
Mayor, council members, I'll be as brief as possible. Stop me at any time if you have questions about anything, and I'll try to answer those. The general fund, which is where the city maintains police, fire, public works, leisure services, those departments are funded through that. We had a budget for this year, estimated revenue of $20,528,000. Right now, we received through the end of February $15,213,000 of that. In total, about 74% of it. Some items just to point out to you related to revenue is our property tax collections. We're about 95% collections on our property tax, which is right in line where we typically are at this time at the end of February. We're in that 94 to 95% range. In lieu of tax payments are right where they're supposed to be. Our local option sales tax, as you're aware of, is lagging behind our estimates. I think by the end of the year we could be as far as $400,000 short on that line item. We've been lucky. This year, I guess, we have some additional revenue to help offset that shortage we're going to have in the sales tax. One of those line items is the hall income tax. A lot of people aren't familiar with that, but the state of Tennessee does have that income tax. And we actually received this year, in addition to what we budgeted, $321,000 over what we budgeted for that hall income tax. I'm not expecting anything like that next year. That's tied back to people's investments, and we all know what the stock market has done in 08.
Where is that on this line?
That
item?
actually
I'm not
falls
seeing it.
under the intergovernmental revenue,
Okay.
line item 3300.
Okay.
We've collected 104% of that one line item, so it's in that line item there.
It's a portion of that
It's a
line item.
portion of that total. I think the total, we budgeted maybe 200,000. It seems like we received 521,000, I think, is what we actually received for the hall income tax. So we've been fortunate there to help make up some of the shortfall in sales tax. We also had a little bit of additional revenue in franchise fees from the cable TV company here in Cookeville. Additional audit that we did internally on the franchise fee, we netted another $61,000 through that. But again, revenue projections right now each month we try to project out the rest of the year. It's going to be close. We budgeted $20,528,000. May not reach all that, but it's going to be pretty close, especially in these economic times. I feel fortunate that what we are looking at, we're going to be lucky, and I think we're going to get pretty close to that number. Going over to the expenditure side, the department heads are doing everything they can to not spend money. They know how tough it is right now, and they're doing everything they can, and I think it reflects in these numbers. We had a total expenditure budget of, including capital, of $20,271,000. $19,915,000 of that was operating expenditure. And of the operating expenditures, we've spent 62% of that number so far. All the departments are doing everything they can. Most of them are, if not all of them, except for maybe the general departments, right under the 66%, which is, if you look at it on an annual basis, that's where we would be 8 months through the year. Our utilities, which is where primarily the majority of the utilities are charged back to the general government department, that's kind of what's drove up that percentage there, expenditure. It's up to 70% on the year already through February, and that's primarily utilities has driven that up. Capital, the departments, we had some capital items. The police department did get their police cars. Some other related equipment that they had to have, we purchased those back earlier in the year, so that's the reason the capital is up to 81%. But again, in total, 62% operating budget, 66% through 8 months of the year, so we're doing good. The department heads are trying everything they can not to spend money. And I'm just going to keep moving on.
Our utilities were about 4% over where we expected to be as far as what the cost of our utilities is.
Yes.
That's the one that's dramatically...
That's the one in the general department, the one line item that sticks out is the utilities. We're going to end up being some $80,000 over on that line item, we think. If you don't have any more questions, I'm going to move on. The State Street Aid Fund, where we maintain, do paving and improvements to roads around town. That's funded through primarily fuel tax that we get back from the state of Tennessee. 62% of that revenue we've received. We're a little bit below where we should be, and again, that goes back to basically people purchasing fuel and, you know, the economy the way it is. We've budgeted $759,000 in revenue. We received $473,000, again 62% of that. Expenditures, we had an operating budget of $635,000. We spent $287,000 to date. Some capital items that we had budgeted for a brush truck, I think, and a sweeper truck. We did purchase that sweeper truck. We've held off on the brush truck, and we're waiting and looking at that again in next year's budget. Public Works has been able to hold off on that budget. We have been paying some of the sidewalks out Broad Street out of this fund to help with that project. And another capital item that you all approved back in March, doesn't reflect as of February, but you approved it in March, was that water truck that the Public Works Department purchased through Gov Deals, I believe. The sanitation fund is had an estimated revenue at the beginning of the year of $1,619,000. If you'll recall, we implemented the sanitation fee for apartment complexes. We kind of postponed that, didn't start it till after the first of the year. The estimate for that one line item, the sanitation for those apartments, we originally budgeted around $300,000. After we finally got it implemented and the way we kind of made some changes to that, that net on an annual basis is going to be in the $240,000 range as opposed to $300,000. We started that in January 1 is when that kicked in, and so the first 1 month actually, because we bill a month behind in the utilities. But we have $875,000 in revenue so far. We budgeted $1.6 million, and we're at 54% of that. And again, we're a little low there because we didn't start that till halfway through the year. On the expenditure side, we had operating expenditures of $1,055,000. We've spent $689,453 through February, which is 65%. One line item there, if you look at commercial collections, it's up a little bit. That was I don't know the exact truck. We had a major repair to one of the trucks there, and that's what drove that line item up so far. Fuel, again, with all the departments, especially in the general fund, we've been lucky there with fuel. Everybody knows the price at the pump came down from where it was last year at budget time, and that's helped quite a bit in our budget as well. And there was a capital items also in this fund. We purchased some carts, the trash carts at residential locations, and some big dumpsters and roll-off containers that they lease out to businesses and individuals. The drug fund, as we all seen in the news lately, Chief of Police has come across $200,000. Hopefully they'll get to keep some of that money. That's not reflected in here yet, but hopefully one day it will be. They have had $40,000 in total revenue that they've brought in through various confiscations, I guess. They've spent $28,000. I've listed on your sheets there some of the items that they have purchased through the drug fund. Those are basically non-recurring items, which is what they're allowed to do with the drug fund in addition to their drug investigations. Animal Control Fund, we have received $160,649 in revenue. That fund, again, is primarily supported by Putnam County, the city of Cookeville, and recently, in the last couple of years, Monterey, Allgood, and Baxter have started to make contributions there, which has helped greatly. Have the new director down there. She's doing a really good job. I know her reports for the adoptions are up each month, and that's really good. She's trying to place those animals as best as she can. Total expenditures through February were $123,385, and that's operating expenditures. You'll notice there we have under capital we budgeted $400,000. That was the money we had available for the expansion of the shelter, and that's kind of on hold right now. The next fund is our Economic Development Fund. And all the activity in this fund relates to the new business park. Everything that this fund is, revenue sources come from property taxes. We budgeted $262,850 for property tax. We received 96, almost 97% of that. Again, the expenditures all relate to the business park, whether it's the payment to the county for our half of the land that was purchased down there, and now we have the engineering contract underway with Barge Wagner to get that designed, and all that expenditures are handled out of this fund. We spent $143,725 to date, and as a matter of fact, I think we're writing the check to the county. We may have just written that for our debt payment to them for our half of this year's payment on that land purchase down there. The debt service fund, that's where we handle all of our bonds, making payments on the principal and interest on bonds and notes that we have. We had estimated revenue of $3,194,000. We received $2,468,000 through February at 77% of that number. We had estimated expenses and total principal and interest payments. We budgeted $3,051,000. We have many of our bond principal payments aren't made until May. That's the reason you don't see those reflected in here yet. One item of note is if you look at line item 49,400, interest on notes. That line item, we have variable rate debt through the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. If you notice there, we budgeted based on their estimated rate for us of 4.5% to 5%. So we budgeted $833,000. We've only spent to date $213,000. That's 25% of that line item. That's because their interest rate for the last several months has been a little less than 1% on that debt. It has been as high as 4.5% over the years, but right now it's at 1%. So we've saved a lot of money on interest costs this last year with the bond fund.
What about 49,300, the principal? Looks like we're only at 9%.
Those are the ones I was talking about in May.
May.
Yeah,
Okay.
we make those payments in May, the principal payments.
When you said earlier, when we were on the first page, you said we were relatively lucky because of the sales tax revenue. Is the difference in that number right there the interest payments, or is this just in the bond fund?
That's just in the bond fund alone. That savings right there over what we'd budgeted. Moving along, Water Quality Department. Again, they had estimated revenue at the beginning of the year, $11,638,000. They billed out $7,874,000, which is 68% of that number. And everything's right in line with the Water Department estimates for revenue. On the expenditure side, the department had budgeted for operating expenditures $9,466,000. They spent $6,298,000 through February, 66%, almost 67% of their budget. And again, everything with the water department, as you'll see through with all the utilities, everything's right in line with budget. Unless you have specific questions, I won't go into any details about the specific line items. Electric department, the same thing. Everything's right in line. $46 million in power sales, almost 47 is what they budgeted. They've billed out so far $34 million, 72% of that number. Again, that's kind of driven by the TVA power rate increases. That's one reason they're a little bit higher than budget right now, part of it. But again, they had operating budget including debt service, equipment, everything the electric department budgeted last year. $55,132,000. They spent $41 million, which is 74, almost 75% of that. Again, part of that is their increased power costs, TVA's rates. It comes back to utilities, and they have to pay TVA that additional cost when they raise their rates too.
So we're at about 58% of our year, but he's at 72% of his operating expense.
We should be at 67% of the year, and he's at 72 on his operating budget, and that's primarily driven by power costs,
But his revenue's up.
electric costs, and his revenue's up too, which should help offset that. 8 months through the year. This is,
Okay, I was thinking 7 months.
yeah, 8 months through the year. 67% of the budget.
Okay.
Gas department, the same. We had budgeted $18 million in revenue. We billed out $10,700,000, 56% of our budget. If you look back up at our residential commercial sales, again, those numbers back in June when the budget was passed, we were looking at gas costs that was extremely high. The gas cost has come back down, so our rates came down, and accordingly our revenue falls with it. But total revenue for the year, including other line items, $18 million. We billed out again $10,784,000, 56%. But everything's right in line with where it should be at this point in the year for the gas department. Expenditures, you can see the same thing on the purchased gas side. We budgeted $15,300,000. We billed out, or we paid $8,984,000. Again, 58% of our power costs or gas costs. And again, the rates, gas costs fell. And back in June, we were looking at much higher rates when we put the budget together. But on the operating side, $17,536,000 we billed out, or we spent $10,328,000, which is 58, almost 59% of that operating budget. Again, all the utilities, all three of them, right in line with where they should be for first 8 months of the year. I think the last fund that I have for you to look at and consider tonight is the employee insurance fund. Our revenue, again, is funded by premiums that the employees share along with the city, and we've received $2,307,000 so far. We had a budget of $3,461,000. Again, 67% of that revenue has been paid into the employee insurance fund. Our claims, if you look at that line item, I'll point that out too. We had a budget of $2,500,000. We spent $1,946,000 through the first 8 months. That's 78% of our claims already. We've had some high claims the last couple of months come in. I asked for Blue Cross for an excess claims report. They sent that to me. We have some people that are pretty sick right now, so I expect those claims to continue for the rest of the year. We've been lucky. The last 5 years we've had really low claims. Blue Cross points it out to us every year, and they've always said they kind of come in cycles where you have every 5 to 7 years you're going to have some bad claims years, and this could be the year we have one. But again, we budgeted $3,010,000. We spent $2,269,000, which is 76% of that total budget so far to date. And with that, I'll stop and answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Any questions by the council? We're not receiving this or anything. We don't
Yeah,
make
you're
a motion. Just enjoying it. I certainly hope, as far as the sickness of our employees, that I'm glad that we have good insurance, and I hope that they pull through it and become healthier and everything comes out okay.
Yes.
Any other comments?
I just had a quick question. I was reading, this may be for Greg. I was reading this week that according to the stimulus package and the 120, or about monies available for infrastructure and things like that, that there was a 120-day period from the day that legislation was received, that if you had a shovel-ready project, that it applied. My question to you all is, are we expecting to have the information back from Barge Wagner so that it's within that 120 days? And have we put them on notice about that 120 days? Or?
Yes, we have put them on notice about that.
Okay.
They're projecting their design to be finished in June. Last I heard.
Which is pretty close to the 120 days, though, correct?
Good.
Yeah, it's close, but from
TDOT's perspective, when I asked the Commissioner about it, he said if I could have it turned in tomorrow, and that was 3 weeks ago, it might be considered. But they already have committed $975 million worth of projects or something.
It's possible, too, that some of the stimulus money might free up other money that's
Yeah,
budgeted.
that's what we're really shooting for, is that if we're not exactly shovel-ready, then there will be some money freed up by the stimulus money to be used for other projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question. Any other comments? This time, we open up our floor to the public to come and speak for up to 3 minutes. Bring your ideas and comments to the city council, and you can be on television. And we ask you to come out. Do we have any comments from the audience? Looks like mostly department heads here tonight. We appreciate them
I
being
brought the Site Selection magazine. We're one of the top 14 micropolitans, according to this magazine, to relocate your business to. So if you are watching this program and want to relocate your business, we're the place to be.
here. Very good. Any comments, other comments from the council? Councilwoman Anderson? All right, seeing no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.